Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the, what month are we? February edition of Little Nuggets of Tech and Telecom. And so excited to feature our guest. We think he's a recurring guest, but we've been doing this long enough, Jen, that we can't really remember from year to year.
That's
Let me move to Jen to do the honors, since you have worked so closely for so many years. I'm relatively a new person to have met Iain, but I thought maybe you could do the intros.
absolutely. Well, we're excited to have lunch with everyone this afternoon. I'm very excited about our guests. Iain Gillott and I go way back. I met Iain as a consultant when I was an analyst, and now he has the title of, I should know this, CTO of WIA. Do I? Oh, I'm
No,
messed
no,
up.
no, it's longer than
Oh,
that.
okay. What?
VP of Innovation and Technology.
Oh,
Even more
So
auspicious.
yeah, well,
exactly.
let me know what it means, and
But WIA, for those who don't know, is the Wireless Infrastructure Association. They're gearing up for their big show, ConnectX, later this spring in early May, and Ian's integral to that planning. So Ian is th all things, but what I think is his greatest gift is he does wireless tech for dummies and is able to bring it down to and that's where our questions are really going to center around all things wireless infrastructure. So, Ian, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, no problem. And by the way, Jennifer, Caroline made it sound like we're really old, didn't she? I mean, we're not that old. We're like 25 years.
Exactly.
It's my
Exactly.
most favorite birthday. That's why I repeat it every year.
Well, Ian, let's start by, all of us, there
Mm.
was so much hype around 5G, a lot of
Mhm.
hype, a lot of some
Mhm.
lack of reality, people would say. Now the talking points are centering around 6G. I
Mhm.
guess, what say you? What can 6G bring us, if anything, that 5G did not?
So I we're good at this in the industry, right? We can go back to 3G and 4G and 5G. We really need to get away from the Gs, I think, sometime. You and I have talked about that in the past. So I think so a couple of things. Number one, yeah, 5G has been deployed. It's not fully there. The coverage is built, right? The carriers are now adding capacity and filling in as they need to, etc. They're densifying. Um, and it's a process we've been through with 3G and 4G. We're pretty good at it by now. 5G advanced is being deployed. That's the next step. And so for those who don't know, the Gs are defined by the 3GPP. And we actually, in technical terms, we talk in releases of the technology, right? And what we do is every 3 or 4 releases of the technology, the standards, we draw a line and say, this is a new G. And actually, 6G is release 20. LTE was release 8, I think was the first one. Release 9 was what we released, deployed here first. So, you can see we've been actually through quite a few evolutions. So along the way from 5G to 6G, we have 5G advanced, so release 18 and 19. And we get things like network slicing is being deployed now and some more advanced features that you get within the core. So there are capabilities we can do along the way. You don't necessarily see them as consumers too much. You don't notice suddenly a big new button on your phone or anything like this. But from a network point of view, from an operator point of view, there are advances, there is efficiencies along the way, and more things they can offer. So if you saw recently, I'll give you an example. T-Mobile, I think, announced recently real-time translation. Did you see that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a really good example of a new service that takes new network. I mean, that's Star Trek stuff, right? Like touch the badge and I can talk to you in French and you can talk to me in German and we can understand each other and things. And that's cool, right? That wouldn't have happened with LTE, 4G or early 5G. That needs the newer technologies, right? So we have this kind of mindset that the next big thing is 6G. We've got to wait until then. But in reality, things are happening along the way. The the things you put in for 5G advanced are needed for 6G. If you go straight from 5G straight to 6G, that's a big, big step for an operator in terms of investment without going through the 5G advanced stage. So if you do a 5G advanced core, that'll take you into 6G. It's the next step, right? Think of it that way. And instead of going up a set of stairs, you can go one step at a time. That's the releases. Or you can go 4 steps at a time. It's harder on your legs, right? But that's what we're talking about here. So 6G will give us, and by the way, I have to, let's get it out of the way right now. AI,
Yeah.
right? Right, because everybody's jumping on there's an AI bandwagon here, and there are implications. But there are things we need to do with AI, and 6G can enable some of that. So we do need lower latency services and things like this. Mark Ganzi, I think, was talking from Digital Bridge earlier this week.
Yes, here at Metro Connect, right?
Yeah, and he was kind of laying out the steps. I think he called them waves, didn't he? Something like that. It's part of that. AI only works if you can connect to the device in the field, in the manufacturing plant, in the home, in the car, on the street. If you don't have data coming in, you can't run AI, and all those connections are wireless. So we're part of the infrastructure, right?
Which brings in like your members of WIA are all the infrastructure builders. And when I was an analyst, I followed all the tower stocks, of which there's 3 public US ones today. They've had a very difficult time lately, and it's reflected in their stock prices. And I won't ask you to, opine on stock, but it's mostly because Charlie Ergen through EchoStar has pulled the contracts, and there's litigation, etc. But I guess the way I think of it is having 3 stronger, viable companies that are going to build is better than 3.5, with the half being the wild card of Ergen and EchoStar. Will they build? Do you agree with that?
Yes, kind of. Yes.
Okay.
But I don't look at it in terms of how many companies are building. I look at it. I'm a nerd, Jennifer. You know this. I'm an engineer, right? So I look at it in terms of spectrum, because if I want to build a network, if I want to build 5G advanced and 6G, I need some spectrum to do that on. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Now, I've got 3 places I can get spectrum. Number one, I've already got some that I'm using for 5G and 4G, and I can refarm that. Okay.
Yeah.
Or I can go buy it privately, or I can get it from the government. Simple as that. Right.
Sure.
So what I look at is, what spectrum can I get? What do I need? Right? What's available? What do I need? What will work best for that application? In every single time, if I get spectrum, if I want to use that and deploy it, I need an antenna and a radio connecting to the network.
You're right.
Right? So if I have, let's take 3.5 gigahertz, right? C-band, right? When we deployed that, the antennas we had for 700 megahertz at AWS and 2.5 gig don't work, right? You need a new antenna and a new radio per band. Okay. So when we're talking now of new spectrum bands, 7 gigs, now up to 13 gig, we're talking about different bands now being made available. That will need new infrastructure. That infrastructure, somebody buys it, somebody puts it on the tower. That's professional services. They're connected up to the networks, etc. So if I have 4 carriers, 5 carriers, 6 carriers, 2 carriers, 3 carriers, that's fine, but it's how much spectrum they've got to deploy and how much is available that's going to drive the investment. And so you can argue that to your point, having bigger, stable carriers who've got the ability to go and buy that spectrum and acquire that spectrum, and we've seen that recently with the private deals that have happened. And we certainly saw it in C-band. What was the spending on C-band? Better than I, like 83 billion or something?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, Verizon 53 alone. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So that's not something that you nip down to the ATM and pull a few bucks out and go. Right. That's some serious investment. So this is a serious game, and it takes stable companies to do that. So that's how I look at the next phase of investment is, what do we need? And I think you have a question on spectrum.
I'm going to pass the baton to Carolyn. That's a
Yeah.
perfect
So,
segue.
perfect segue, both Ian and Jen. It's not like we coordinated on this. So there's a lot there to comment on in the spectrum environment. So the Trump administration and the big beautiful bill, has freed up, has indicated they would like to see at least 800 megahertz of spectrum freed up. However, many of the bands, as you know, Ian, that they've identified for study by the NTIA and for potential use for full power commercial are not plug and play, like we had maybe 15, 20 years ago. These bands are encumbered. There are existing users, and not all of them are interested in moving, even if it means upgraded equipment or more efficient operations to adhere to their mission. So I guess the question is, if you were the CEO of a large wireless carrier and you're looking out over the next 5 to 10 years, what's your comfort level that you're going to have access to a pipeline to augment your spectrum portfolio on, as you need it? And then separately, where do you see satellite companies, this burst of activity through Kuiper and SpaceX, et cetera? Where do you see that fitting into this ecosystem and the competitive dynamic? Two very different questions, but I wanted to put those two out there.
Yeah. All right. So I'll deal with the satellite thing in a minute. So in terms of spectrum, I'm the CEO. I'm pretty happy. No. I've got options. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to sit there as a CEO and realize is that, to your point, nothing's unencumbered these days, right? The days of open, free spectrum, available spectrum are gone, right? They've actually been gone for about 20 years. Okay, so we can forget that. That's not realistic. So now I'm going to I work in a crowded environment. I'm going to have a plan as a CEO, and the FCC just got back its spectrum authority, for example, in the bill, which it hadn't had for a few years. So that kind of put the hold on a few things. So we do have a pipeline coming, and you've got some predictability there. You're never quite sure, but there's some predictability. So that's the second thing. I'm also going to go do some private deals. The spectrum is out there and is owned by different investors and different groups, so you can get to it, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a very definite, clear plan of what I want to achieve. Now, what I want to achieve is going to depend on what I have today, okay? And not all the analysts are always putting out these charts that some carrier's got more spectrum than the other carrier in this higher band and lower band, right? It's we were talking before the start here. It's a wedding cake. It's a layered cake, and you play with those assets and you mix them in order to accomplish what you want in each market. Each carrier doesn't have the same spectrum in each market. It varies. So it's very much it's a complicated answer between the 600, 700, 850, PCS, AWS, 2.5 gig, C-band, CBRS. All right, we go on and on. We've got a lot of bands. It's not like it was 25 or 30 years ago. So I think the answer to your question is you plan. You have a strategy. It's not a case, oh, quick, they're having an auction, let's go buy something. No, it's very much a thing. The one thing I would say on spectrum, I think is very important to understand now is, and I wrote a blog about this recently, the industry has been asking for bigger and bigger chunks of spectrum. So LTE we used to deploy in 10 and 20 megahertz channels. 5G is deployed in 100 megahertz channels. Now we're asking for 200 and 400 megahertz chunks. You mentioned the 800 megahertz within the OB3 or whatever they call it. Why? Right? And the answer is you can get much more data. You can be a lot more efficient putting data through a larger channel size. And the best example I'll give you is think of a 2-lane highway going down the road. You've got 2 lanes of traffic. On either side, you've got a shoulder and you've got white lines, right? So the total space the road takes is our channel, but I've got guard bands down the side called the shoulders, right? If I have a 4-lane highway, I don't get 4 shoulders. I have 2 shoulders, right? So efficient, the amount of traffic I can get down that highway proportional to the space I'm taking is higher. It's more efficient. And that's what happens with spectrum. The smaller the channel, I have guard bands. The bigger the channels, I have the same guard bands, but I can get more data through. And that's why we're asking for more, because we need more data. So that's what I'm going to be planning as the CEO. So that answers it. Satellites. Yeah, those. Yeah, they're up there.
Birds.
More and more and more of them as each day.
Yeah. Well, I'm a amateur astronomer. I have a smart telescope, as Jennifer knows. I keep sending her photos, and this my every time my camera takes photos, it stacks them all. It discards them when there's a satellite flying over. So I actually know how many satellites are flying around. But it's the satellites have their role. They're great. I use one when I go mountain biking and skiing backcountry. I have a messenger. Yeah, used it for a while. Satellites are limited by the rules of physics. People like to avoid the laws of physics. But the best example I'll give you is even a low Earth orbit satellite. If you're in Washington, D.C., that's like connecting to a cell site in Raleigh, North Carolina. So if you take that cell site and just moved it up, that's how far away it is. So we talk about low latency applications, speed of response to feed AI, things like this. That becomes a problem with the satellite. Satellites are great at coverage in different areas and things like this. They're also hard to get up there, and they're very hard to maintain, if you may have noticed. They also need cooling. You can't just put a satellite up there and it's in a vacuum, therefore it's good. You actually need radiated panels on them to get the heat out of them and things like this. So to me, and we've looked at this, the satellites, to me, it's very much a complementary service. I can see, I think the carriers have said this, some of the tower companies have said this, it's complementary. We've been through this before, and Jennifer and I, when we were in kindergarten, she and I remember the whole original small cells, right? And there's a company called Lucent way back when who had a small, remember the cube, Jennifer?
I do, yes.
Yeah, they were going to be easy to deploy, and we wouldn't need cell towers anymore, right? Because we're going all these cubes all over the place. And she's laughing now, you see. That didn't happen because physics got in the way, right? There's implications of these things. And I think the same thing with satellites is there is an absolute role, there's an absolute role to play. Certainly a place like West Texas, there's a lot of coverage areas we can go to.
But so it's simply put, SpaceX with whatever it is buying from Charlie Ergen, it's at 45 or 65 megahertz of spectrum, cannot replace this.
It can complement that, but we would have a hard time doing this call on. I have Starlink. As you know, I have an RV, and we have Starlink, and it does have. Excuse me. It does hit a pause as a satellite comes over. More satellites fill that problem, but there's an absolute latency you can see, and the latency is the time to go from the ground to the satellite and back again. I mean, it's a physical distance. You can, speed of light and all the rest of it. So it will be great for I'll be able to call you. It'd be like actually having a 3G conversation, 3G connection. We could do some stocks, we could do messaging, we can do some basic data. We will be talking on the phone. You may notice a little lag.
So
but
the death of tower companies is widely exaggerated then, if I'm hearing you, for those who just believe that satellites can replace terrestrial networks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
and also,
I'll give you another problem with satellites. They don't go in building.
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, public safety, first responders. That's a major issue, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is also has come up with respect to the BEAD money, which is a lot of the landline-based companies, including smaller companies in rural areas, made, I think, a very real pragmatic argument, and that is satellite does not involve any more infrastructure. You're not going to get a bunch of people digging and climbing towers and stringing wire, which is what some of these localities are looking for, which is job creation, right? By the additional build. And the argument from some of these smaller companies who are based in these communities, who are a fiber solution, would argue you shouldn't prefer necessarily satellite in every situation because, as you pointed out, Iain, it has some really good characteristics and is a perfect solution in a number of cases, but not in every. Correct. And so I think that was part of it, was there's no new infrastructure that's going in. And Jen, I think that gets to your point. It's a complement, not
I would correct, Carolyn, I would correct you on one little thing. There is infrastructure going in. It's very expensive infrastructure. It's going on a rocket and it's going up into space.
Right.
Okay. Now, but no, it is not creating local jobs of digging up, putting, fiber down the road, building cells, whatever you're doing, right? There are some communities where putting in fiber is not economic, right? There are a few. It's more and more economic as we go on. It's quite cost effective these days. So I'm not going to tell you that every community can get fiber. In some locations.
Right.
Satellite makes sense, right? But does it make sense to connect? I live in West Austin, Texas, right? West of Austin. Does it make sense to use satellite here? Absolutely not. No, I've got I've got multiple broadband options. And I think any metro market, any reasonable sized town, that's true. So
I think we need to come up with a wedding cake analogy for this notion, this reality, which is there's lots of flavors of connectivity. And depending on what your use case is, where you're geographically located, what you're looking for from that connection will very often dictate what the solution is that you end up taking. But there's a lot of different solutions for lots of different use cases. There was no question in that, Jen.
No question.
I was just summarizing where I think we were.
But maybe the other thing I wanted to ask is about, you mentioned densification. You've done a lot of work on private now, in building assets. And I'm at this conference now where they've come up, but they're kind of like the kid in the corner no one really wants to talk about, which is strange to me because I feel like they're going to have their day in the sun if networks need to densify. What do you think?
Are we talking in building or private?
Yeah, in building, sorry.
In building. In building is really interesting. It's been around forever. It's still there. I was actually talking to AT&T this morning about this. We just did consumer survey. We've been releasing the data this week, and consumers expect to walk into a retail store and have a connection on their phone because they're gonna compare prices, right? They expect when they go to a stadium to see an event, which is very expensive these days, they're going to have absolutely fantastic connectivity. They expect to walk into a hotel and have connectivity. And if they're paranoid like me, they don't use the hotel Wi-Fi, right? I use for security and things like that. So wherever we go today, we expect connectivity. And what we're finding is, and the survey data shows this, is if they don't have that connectivity, they don't go back. So there's a sizable number of people who won't go back to a retail store or are likely to go somewhere else because of connectivity, right? And I've done this. I go to Lowe's. You know what the different definition is between a project and a job?
No.
Right. A job is one trip to Lowe's. A project is multiple trips to Lowe's.
And what are we on now? We're in a job?
Oh, yeah, but anything I do, it's like 3 trips to Lowe's. You go first, you need, then you go back, you forgot some stuff, then you go back to take back what you didn't need, right? But you go into Lowe's, Home Depot, Target, whatever. You walk through those aisles, and I look on my phone to find out where the thing is I want, right? Which aisle it's on. And I want connectivity. And you've got those tunnels, which are really bad for RF, all that stuff stacked up. But I expect that connectivity, right? And if I can't do that, I just think, in my mind, I'm thinking, don't go back there, go over there because you know where to find it. And that behavior is not unusual, we're finding. So in building it's subtle. It's one of those subtle needs you forget you need until it's not there, right?
Yeah.
And the industry, it does a lot of smaller players, but at the end of the day, it's driven by the venues. So the idea of building a sports venue, a stadium this time, without in-building connectivity from the carriers and from Wi-Fi and all this, that's inconceivable today, right? I mean, SoFi Stadium, Levi Stadium, where the fantastic 49ers play, I was there last year for a game. Their connectivity is phenomenal in there. There's 80,000 people sitting around me sending photos, and you just take it absolutely for granted. So
People
it does
feel comfortable spending the money. I mean, if you spend like whatever, $300 a ticket and can't
yeah,
upload your photo to grandma.
yeah,
Problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and yes, I want to get my concessions and I want to order them and have delivered, or order it and go and pick it up and things like
Yeah.
this. So the economics of the industry have shifted a little, but absolutely that need is there, and it's not going away. We've kind of, in the discussion, look at how we started this discussion. We talked about 5G, 6G, then we talked about spectrum, we talked about satellites, and oh, by the way, now we're getting to in building.
Yes.
But in terms of importance, we could have started with in building.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
So Jen, I know we're kind of
Yeah.
getting close to our deadline, but there's a question in the chat that I wanted to throw at you because it is technical, Iain, and I thought you might have some fun with it. One of our attendees is asking, in light of the U.S. moving to rip and replace ZTE and Huawei equipment out of their networks, should the MNOs move to 5G standalone as their networks?
Ooh, okay. I'm not sure the two are related, because we're doing 5G standalone anyway, not related to which vendor you get.
Right.
So as we move down that path of 5G, 5G advanced, 6G, you move to standalone anyway. Standalone means you're not supporting 4G. So that's happening anyway. The best way to examine it is there's no 3G spectrum. There's no 3G network left. We've refarmed all that, right? On today's network in the US, you use 5G connection or 4G on your phone. If you go to Europe, you'll still see 3G and even 2G sometimes. And as we go 5G, 5G advanced, 6G, we will refarm 4G as well. We will rip all that out, okay? So it's not a vendor discussion, it's an architecture discussion. So,
Thank you,
okay.
Iain.
If I could ask the last question, I'm just curious. Well, two things. One, before we get off, I do want to highlight that Iain mentioned your blog. Where can people find that?
WIA.org on the website. It's also on LinkedIn, Wireless Infrastructure Association.
He's a great follow. Secondly, he has an amazing distribution list, which I'm lucky to be on, where he sends photos of his travels, which is amazing. And that's another good one to get on. So reach out to him via LinkedIn on that. And then I guess the last question I'd ask, because I always like to know, the old analyst in me, what are you focused on that you think is underappreciated either by investors or the industry? Like, what is one thing you're looking at that you don't feel like people are looking at enough?
Yeah. So, by the way, when you sent me the questions ahead of time, I was thinking, there's no way she's going to get through all these. I talked to. I'm gonna say the obvious one is AI.
Yeah.
Right. But I think what's underappreciated with AI, everybody's focused on the NVIDIA chipset and the massive data center and the learning and the large language models and the chat GPT. And everybody forgets that you need the connectivity within that.
Yes.
You can build the biggest data center in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Kansas or Nebraska or something, or Dakotas. But unless you have massive amounts of fiber connecting to that, the data cannot get in, get processed, and get out, right?
Right.
And that fiber connects to the end user. It connects to the home and it connects to cell towers right? And then that connects to smartphones and tablets and laptops and all these types of things. So the infrastructure that we talk about, we're very focused on the processor without thinking about all the other things. I'll use the power station analogy, and I don't mean that you need a power station next to a data center, but it's like building a power station, like hydroelectric dam, but don't build the transmission lines in and out of it, and don't connect those transmission lines to the home with a meter on it so you can actually get the power, right?
Yeah.
And we have to really think about that's what's underappreciated here is I'm not sure there's a danger of this, but
Right.
we could end up with a situation where we're building capacity in one area and building bottlenecks in others by not thinking about the flow of the entire ecosystem.
And to that point, it's always kind of surprising to me because I live in Northern Virginia that people are mystified as to why there are so many data centers in Northern Virginia. And you have to remind them, well, there was already infrastructure there due to AOL. They had an entire greenway was built out to facilitate, the ability to make use of all of that undeveloped land. It was very specifically built upon the infrastructure that was there, right? It wasn't just, Northern Virginia looks good. So it's
Well,
exactly to your point. They were able to
it's
connect.
the fiber landing point for all of the transatlantic stuff.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And that's why the data centers started where they started.
Yeah. So I've been saying for a while, we've been saying it is wireless infrastructure is AI infrastructure. Fiber infrastructure is AI infrastructure. And I think that's a really, it's a subtle point, but it's very, very important that, people understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much. And you're always a highlight, always great analogies and fun facts. So, Carolyn, this was fun. I think I'm getting kicked out of my hotel room, so I have to end this call.
Enjoy your conference, Iain. It was really good to see you, and thank you again.
Likewise.
As Jen said, highlight of our little webinars here, and we hope to have you back again.
Well, and I know some several folks on. If anybody has any follow-up questions, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm not shy.
Thank you very, very much, Jen. It was great to see you.
You too. Thank you both.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.